Hi, everyone, and welcome to Inside Unreal, a weekly show where we learn, explore, and celebrate everything Unreal. I'm your host, Victor Broden, and with me today I have 3D artist specialist Pasquale Shanti, calling in all the way from Tampa, Florida, I believe.
Yes, yes. Hi, Victor. Hello to everyone. Thank you
Yes,
for inviting me for this live stream.
of course. I've wanted to have you on here ever since I first saw the initial renders from the Archviz demo. That we've then since gone on to release on the Learn tab of the Epic Games Launcher. And you were the lead designer on the project working with us here at Epic.
Yes, yes. It was a great project, great experience, and everyone in the team helped a lot on that project, and it was a long going, maybe 6 months, I think it was.
Something like
But
that?
yeah, I
Yeah,
think
but that was not your
something
first
like that.
foray into ray traced Archviz scenes, though. You've been doing that for quite some time, right?
Yes, I started ray trace right when it started, right when everything got into ray trace. I just started to learn it, and maybe a couple of years ago, when I saw the demo from Star Wars, that's when I said,
Yeah, the reflection demo.
yes, yes, that one.
Yeah, it's pretty
Cool.
impressive. I mean, we've come quite a long way since then. In terms of
Yeah.
now as far as I know, you're actually doing a lot of this on a laptop, right? With a an
Yes.
external dedicated GPU. And I believe that's how you did most of the work throughout the project as well, right? Was on that hardware?
Yes. So the hardware is an external GPU using RTX 2080 Ti from NVIDIA and MSI laptop, 32 gigs of RAM and i9 processor that helped me with 8 cores on it.
Yeah, it's
Really good.
pretty impressive.
Good experience.
And speaking a little bit of sort of design and where you got your ideas from. You did mention that your apartment was a little bit of an inspiration for the
Yeah,
scene.
some parts of my apartment, like that's where I got some inspiration of for the scene. At first, the scene started like more classical, since Ray Trace has more reflections, and I wanted to dedicate more on reflections. So I started to do a classical scene more on gold and silver. But then we changed direction, and I wanted to make something more cozy, more a little bit like Scandinavian style, mixed with some mid-century, and
Yeah.
this is what came up.
Why don't we go ahead and dig into the project a little bit and see
Yeah, sure.
um, some of the processes that took you to where the project is today.
Okay, so yes, so this is the main project you can see here. So first thing I wanted to talk is about the lighting. So the first time we open the project, if we go in process volume here, the first thing I usually do is I go to the global illumination, which is global illumination. For now, for just a preview, I put final gather, uh, max bounces to 1, and sample pixel to 4. Just because, for performance issue, it's better to have this just for a preview when you're working in the workflow. And after for the final production, you could put it back to brute force, and then
Yeah,
we'll
and
see the difference from brute force and final gather.
we should probably mention that we also had to turn it down a little bit to try to make the screen share
Yes, 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 yes.
as good as possible. At full 4K resolution, the screen share was not really keeping up.
Yeah. So we push it to 1080p, and I think it looks okay there. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. It looks it
Okay, so
looks,
it's
looks
good.
good.
It looks fine. So it's going on the lighting setting. As we see the lighting for this scene, we used directional light. That's the main source of our lighting. It simulates the sun. And then we use the forward rectangular lights to push more information inside the scene um, for the sky, those kind of information. So as you see, if we pull these all off, this is how the scene starts. So it's very it's very dark, and let's go see some settings of the lighting. Okay, let's go to the camera. Okay, so the rectangular lighting here, As you see, it goes. We put on each window a rectangular light that simulates, puts more information inside the scene. It will also be very dark. And these lights, we try to put them to match the window. So for the settings of the lighting, for the radius, initial radius, this is where, let me go a little bit back, like we could see. I put it to 200. So where this ends, it means that the light stops here. So we want to push more information, even on this side here of the wall. We just pull this a little bit up. So essentially all the lights are all the same in intensity. And for the directional light, that's the sun. So sun is it's important in ray trace, as I'll show you the source here what happens. So I'm gonna move the sun a little bit on the right. Okay, just this. Okay, the source angle. So the more higher it is and the more softer the shadows will fade. As we can see here, right here, the shadows will fade. And they're more realistic in a way for the sun. I usually put a low value, so maybe 0.3 could be good, something like that. If you put it right up, it will be very fake. As you can see, the sharp shadows here. With ray trace, they just fade, and they're very more realistic. Let's go back to the fabric settings. I wanted to show you some material settings. So essentially what we created here, the team created master material. And this master material, you could create your own material and change everything with this master material. Then we'll go in the settings of the master material after. Let's just try to change the mood of the scene with just the base color tint. So right here, change our color. As you can see, everything is in real time. That's awesome. We don't need to wait times for rendering, and we just see everything in real time. Let's just put this something. Just changing the base color. That's the original color I was. This is the base color. Same thing we could do with the wall. So built-in. And so on, even the carpet, whatever material is used in the master material, you could change its settings.
And it's a fairly straightforward process to promote your parameters to scalar and then use them in the instance, right?
Yes, yes. As you see, even the carpet could change colors. But to show you how the material works, let's go in the camera, maybe where the wall is. Yeah, something like this. I already created here some materials that I created with Substance Painter. So what a Substance Painter does, it kicks even this this last material. It puts the roughness, the ambient occlusion, and metallic packed all in one. So to create the master material, just go to Content, just write Master. And here's a master material. Right click, and we go Create Material Instance. So I already created this. And it's our wall brick. Okay, so to create this wall, first thing I wanted to do is to create, we're going to open the base color tint. because I want to have to change the color. And then the base color texture, we're going to use a texture. As you see here, the texture, the primary texture of the master material will pop up. We just click base color. And we drag and drop our diffuse material right here. So I think the same thing I want to do with normal map. So we're going to use a normal map, click normal map, use a texture, yes. We go down, click on normal map, and we drag our normal map on there. So since this is a packed version, so my reference is in here, it's created with Substance material. If you create your own materials with Substance, you could use ambient occlusion. We just tick this on, and when we do that, we'll see use RMA. So we have to use that as our ambient occlusion, roughness, and metallic together. So we go down here, we click RMA, and we just drag this on here, and we created our wall material. And if we don't create our materials with Substance, we have a normal roughness, we just click this, so we use roughness texture. Instead of RMA, we just use the roughness texture. Let's apply this on the wall, see what happens. The tiles will be very big, as you can see. So it's master material, we could even tile. We could tile our wall. Let's put 4-4. It's looking okay. It's a little, we need more glossiness on it. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna activate the roughness. Activating the roughness, I'm gonna put the value a little bit down. As you can see, it's the reflection comes in.
Yeah, it gives you a little bit of that gloss that you would expect from some of the tiles.
Yeah.
That's a nice wall you built there.
Yes, just retexture. We just changed the mood of our scene.
Oh, I thought you laid all the bricks one by one.
No, no, no. So let's go on the. Let me put this back how it was. Then there's even a nice documentation online that shows all the process of the ray trace scene. Okay. Do something else. So the post process of the post process that we use for this scene. Essentially, everything is in the post process, and it's very important to insert the right values, or else everything will be dark, especially in the exposure. As you can see, very important here. Let's go to reflection. I want to show you some reflections. Okay. So see a little bit reflection, what reflections do in some settings of the reflection. So as you can see here, this prop. We go to reflections, ray trace reflections. Okay, now the bounces are 1. The more higher the value is, and the more lighting will bounce. So where it's dark here, it's gonna brighten up, a cost of performance. So you have to be aware that this could affect the performance. Actually, first thing I'm gonna do is just put brute force. Sample per pixel, the higher the value is, and the more the noise will be cleaned up. As you can see here, there's a lot of noise. We'll put a value maybe 6. It starts cleaning up. See how clean that is?
Yeah, and the difference between the brute force method and the final gather, do you know enough to explain those two?
Yeah, so the brute force essentially is the main one that you should use for the final render. Simulates the bounces of the lighting. The difference, the final gather, there's only one bounce.
Okay.
So it's used only for previews, and that's good. And the other one you could put more bounces of light, but it's very performant, so the performance could go down a lot with that.
Does it mean that when you use the brute force method, does it mean that the GPU will try to compute it no matter how long it takes to get the final image?
Yeah.
Okay.
And here the bounces are very demanding. See how bright it comes this?
Mm-hmm.
So from 1, you can see here how dark it is right here. And if we put like 4, the light starts bouncing around, but everything starts lagging after. And this is only for production. That's why I prefer to use Final Gather only for the preview and the viewport, so it could work better. And then final production will just put brute force and maybe bounces for and sample per pixel for my output video. Just put back to 2 for now. I'll show you how it is with. This is without. This is without global illumination, and this is with global illumination.
It's a big difference.
That makes yes, that's a very big difference.
And if you just happen to join the stream, the project is available on the Learn tab of the launcher. You can go and download it and pretty much play with everything that Pasquale is showing off right now.
So for the shadows here, always for the reflections, as we see, if we put hard shadows, you could maybe notice in here how hard they are. They're not that realistic. So that's why I prefer area shadows. It softens everything up and it makes it very realistic here. If we go to our creator, camera 4, camera. So same thing here. Let's see the difference from 1. Okay, this is 1. So ray trace reflection max bounces to 1. As you can see here, see how dark it is here?
Mm-hmm.
So if we put bounces to 4, everything's going to be very realistic. More bounces, more light. Let's clean it up a little bit. We put 6. And it cleans it up from the noise. You could try to simulate it. It's incredible how the shadows are reacting in real time. It's great to see everything in real time.
Yeah, the bitrate of the screen share is definitely taking a hit.
Yes, because for streaming, it's a little demanding.
Yeah, but if you're curious to check it out, you can go ahead and download it and play it.
Okay, let's go back to the camera. Now let's go see some post-process. Which personally I use in post-process or start from here. So the exposure is important. And I usually put these two the same value. Like that we don't have, that eye value thing that we always see. Like if we take it out. The eye adaptation. That's what it's chromatic aberration. I like this because it gives a nice feel for the camera. So as you see, the more it gives this distorted feel. But usually I use a value 0.1 is good, just to give it just a little bit of chromatic aberration. I usually use a lot even vignette, because I like to have a nice vignette in the scene. Even here, low values, because who else would not look that good? Maybe a value of 0.3 is good. 0.4. Grain is even nice. It's a nice touch grain. Always low values, or else look what happens if we put it much high.
Yeah, it almost looks like the path tracer are having an issue there.
Yeah, the path tracer. Yeah, but low values are good just to make it more realistic, you know, like that. Everything's not super clear, super perfect. White balance is another one that I like. If you want to make more warm the scene, pull up the white balance. More colder, just lower down the settings. Yeah. These are global shadows, midtones, highlights. These are all for, I usually do not touch these, but maybe global. If I see that the scene's maybe too much saturated, then I'll just, you know, pull down a little bit the saturation, make it more realistic.
And do you have a workflow there where you tend to just, is that something you would add as the last thing in the scene? Or do you actually
Yes.
play around with it throughout iteration as well?
No, I play around. Yeah, right when I'm in the scene, I always play around with the feel. First, the lighting is the first thing that I want to have right, and then when I'm good with that, I just go on and play around with the other ones. Like shadow, you can see the shadows. See how dark they are. So in here, if you have some
Mm-hmm.
dark values, you could pull it up. This just play around a little bit and get the right touch. I like even the slope a little bit, not too much. If the scene is a little bit dark in some areas, the slope is really good. We just try and pull down the slope a little bit. Even here, not too much, or else look what happens. So just a small value.
So how,
This.
how would you how would you explain the slope value? What is it doing?
It usually gets the dark areas and it brightens it up a little bit. It's like a gamma.
And we can see it a little bit, I think, around the yeah, right there.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So if it's very dark, like suppose it's like this, I just play around a little bit, just put it a little bit, 0.7, something like that. Just not to make it that much. So for here, if we use a global illumination, the amplitude occlusion should be off. So everything should be off here. Ambient occlusion, ambient reduce ambient occlusion. And if we use global illumination, ray trace global illumination, that should be off. It would be great to put all these settings different than ray trace. Let's see, screen space reflection is where the one where you bake your lights.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the old screen space reflection. Same thing for ambient occlusion. Since we have two, we have ambient occlusion for the baked one, and we have ambient occlusion for the ray trace. This is a nice feature. So screen percentage. So what did this do? Now it's 200. So the screen here, what I'm seeing now, it's 100%. If you change this to 200, everything will lag, but you can see how more crisp and clean it is.
Mm-hmm.
It gets more resolution, so it doubles the resolution. That's why I use it when I create my videos. The last thing I do is go here. So in the viewport, I leave 100 because or else it would not move no more. And then post process, we just put 200 here, screen percentage. So like when it outputs the video, it'll double the resolution. It'll be better in quality.
So I can see that you have two post-process volumes there.
Yes, it was one was for the tutorial that we used the original one. Essentially, I'm just using this one here instead of using the other one. I just created that one in case. So essentially, yeah, these are all the settings I usually use. Want to see some camera settings?
Yes, please.
Okay. Let's use this one, camera 6.
We had a question if it took you
Yeah.
if it took you 8 hours to render this, and maybe we should highlight that it's actually all in real time.
Yes. So here in the camera settings, I show this camera here that we're now, camera 06. Something going on. Camera 06, not showing. I think the camera is blocked. That is strange. So Victor, I don't know what's happening. The camera is not showing. So it's showing here camera 5, but if you put camera 5, see if that's working. No. Okay, sorry. There was a simulation still on, that's why.
Yeah, so none
The
of the values are.
simulation of, yes, none of the values are, okay, cool. Okay, so camera 5, let's use this one then. Sorry for that. Okay, here we are, great. Okay, so now this camera is set to focal length 35. Usually when I use shots that are near, I usually use a 50. And for the focus, we do manual focus. And you wanna, say we wanna focus on these props here. We don't know how we could focus on if we don't have like a guide or something. So we just pick this, draw debug focus plane, and we'll show you a plane.
Oh,
so
okay.
here, when you move, yeah, when you move this plane, so when it cuts right in the middle, that's where it's gonna focus. Let's suppose we're gonna focus on this pillow, so we'll put it there. In this case, we wanna focus on the props. I'm gonna put it here. And of course, the aperture, the more lower it is and the more depth of field we're gonna have in the scene. You can see here. It's a great depth of field that came up. I think it was in the 4.16 maybe, I don't remember. We did this cinematic depth of field, it's very, very great. Let's suppose that the camera moves. So this is gonna be blurred. And if you wanna focus always on these props, we could even do a camera tracking. So instead of manual mode, we could go tracking mode. We click on tracking. Here it says active to track. We're gonna click the picker. I'm gonna say, let's track this one. But focus is on there. What happens if we go even back, it always stays on focus. That's good if we like pan our camera and our scene back. See, it always stays in focus.
Do you use that to? Do you use that to specifically showcase sort of when you're doing animated camera tracks and such?
Yes, perfect. When I wanted to focus always on an object, I just use that, and then I pan my camera slowly on the back. Yes, maybe turns. Actually, I'll show you the sequencer, how I use it. Just a simple way how you use it. It's not that crazy. There's more professional ways to use it, but I'll just show you the easiest way I use it. So let's just create a new master sequencer. Add level sequence, and we're gonna call this. Okay, here we have our sequencer. The first thing I do is just, we wanna track, let's say we wanna start with this camera here. So in a camera actor 5. First thing I do, I usually use camera cut track. So from here, we select our cameras. So we're gonna select a new one. We're gonna do camera 5. And here creates our timeline. We're gonna select our camera 5. And in track, we want to put transform. Click this. And now we're in the camera here. Let's suppose that we wanna create a frame right here. So we put our first frame here. Timeline, we're gonna put it a little bit, maybe 100. Zoom inside a little bit. I'm gonna put another keyframe. And here's our first track. So the thing I like to do now, so it starts slowly, as you can see for the curve, and then it fades out slowly. I usually like it linear. So to do that, I just go here, show animation keys. We select our camera, zoom a little bit out. I select all the keyframes, and we'll just put linear. This way, it starts and it finishes without fading, without slowing.
Yeah, it has a constant speed, right?
Yeah, constant speed, perfect. I use that a lot, unless you have to do something specific with make it, fade, make it more slower. But I usually use linear for everything. So from here to after we create our cuts, so let's pull up our timeline. I'm gonna make more frames here. And let's zoom out. Okay. We're gonna extend this. Okay, now we're in camera 5. Put it here. So just duplicate camera 5. And we're gonna put another camera, the one that we just created, duplicate it. We're gonna put camera 10. So it's gonna be the same as the 5. So let's say that this one here, let's just select camera 10, pick transform. Let's see this one here, we're gonna, this time we wanna focus on the sofa. So we go, this time I'm gonna do manual mode. So I wanted to focus to be here. The first keyframe.
And then you're just manually moving the camera in the viewport, right?
Yes, and yes, in the viewport with the middle mouse button, you just move kind of left or right or up and down, pressing the middle mouse button. And with the right one, you just turn the camera just something like this.
Chad is saying that you.
This is the fast way, so it's not the professional way. This is the fast way to do your. That's how I do mine.
You can also record your entire fly through, right? If you actually wanted to control it with a gamepad or your keyboard.
Yes. Yes.
And then you can play around with those values themselves. Chad was saying that you need a cat. Yeah. You need a cat on the couch or something. Something to
a cat.
Yeah, something to live up the scene.
Maybe a dog. I like cats, but I have a dog. Actually, there he is. Dog. Okay, so suppose that we want these 2 frames. Just start with these 2. So after we're happy with our frames, we're gonna click this, render this movie to a video or image. Okay, so here are the settings. I usually use JPEG or PNG as image, so it saves it more faster, and there's less issues with that. And then I import them in a program software like Premiere or After Effects to compose it. I usually do 4K here. Version quality, I always put 100. I'll put directly, this is where you want to save all your files. Just create a folder and all the images will be in there. You just click capture and it'll start rendering. And it's super fast with...
There's a parameter down there that is fairly important when you do that. If you want to bring it up again, which is the warm-up time, right?
Yes.
I think it's there at the bottom. Because what essentially does is that it will load
textures or streaming texture, the shaders, yes.
And so if you're doing this and you're noticing that you see materials or textures popping in once you render it out, that's because you need to add a little bit of a warm-up time so that all of that can get cached prior to the movie being rendered out. Just a nice little tip I figured I'd share. Yeah,
that's cool. Yeah, I usually use that when I do outdoor scenes, because the rocks or something they load after, and so I usually use the warm up so that when it starts, everything is loaded in there. So trees and rocks and whatever's in the scene outdoor. Yeah, that's a good call out. And if we have animation, and if we have audio, I never use audio, so I do it after. And we could use even a custom frame rate. I just use 24 frames a second. It's the standard. But if you're using 30
I think also what's important to note here is that you can crank up all the settings to absolutely match, or max, not match. You can crank up the settings to max, and halt essentially the viewport in the editor to a crawl. But once you capture the movie, they will all still be at that ultra high resolution when it gets played back in the proper sequence. And it still only takes it's still less than a second per frame, I believe.
Oh yes. It's super fast. With a 4K, it's around 1-2 seconds. It depends on the scene, even how demanding the scene is, and the settings in the post process. So if you put like ray trace very high, like 6 samples or 8, so that will take longer to render. But essentially, it's very fast. Even the output, it's very fast. But the great thing is that you could see everything in real time. So that's the benefit of ray trace. So you could see everything in real time, and that's what it is. Okay, Victor. This is just little tips that I know. Let's see how the scene is. I'm happy to see that I'm happy to see online, the scene that we created from Epic Games. Everyone's using it already to showcase their products and to play around even with the scene. I saw really cool things out there. Really happy about it. You hear me, Victor?
Yeah, still here.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. So yeah, essentially these are all the tips of the Archway scene, and I'm going to download it for you.
We definitely have a couple of questions if you don't mind digging into a little bit more details regarding the scene. One of the first ones were, and I believe this question was in relation to when you were making the brick material on the wall. And the question goes, while it is almost monochrome, how about color bleeding and noise if you make one wall saturated red?
So they're saying that it's too red?
No, I believe they were wondering sort of what happens to the color bleeding and noise if the wall is completely red.
That's a more technical question.
All right, we'll leave that one for chat and the forums.
Yes, thanks.
The next one, I believe you won't have any issues answering. They were wondering if the rectangular light in front, if the rectangular lights that are in the windows, if they were in front or behind of the window mesh.
They're in front. They're in front because we put everything. Let's go see. Yeah, they're all in front. And they're in the back. We have some issues on sharing, as you can see here. So every single light is just a little bit in front of every single window.
Nice. All right. Let's see. This one might be a little bit more technical, but I'm gonna go ahead anyway. Is there a way to get an object to cast a ray trace shadow, but hide the object itself in the scene?
Well, if you don't want an object to cast ray trace shadows, there is an option. So let's go to this one here. And let's go to GI. So visible in ray trace, we could pick this off. It will not appear in ray trace. So no shadows will appear in the ray trace for the object selected. If you click it, then it will have, I don't know if that's the answer, but
I think the question was specifically for kind of a specific scenario where they want to hide the actual object itself, but still have it draw a ray traced shadow.
Oh, okay, so they want to hide the object, and they want always to cast a shadow. Well, that's more technical then.
Yeah, I'm not actually sure if that's possible, since we do need the information.
Unless the object is invisible, but it will not cast shadows. So I don't know. Maybe on the forums.
There was another question regarding to post process, and I think it's worth highlighting because I did bring up that you had 2 in the scene, and that's generally if it wasn't for this demo, there's only one global post process in the.
Yes. There's only one. There's only one. Yes. The other one was just created just for in case I needed it. But there's only one in the scene. Actually, in the post process, usually the first thing I do. So when you put the post process in the scene, it creates this cube here, as you can see. So instead of scaling it to match your meshes or the whole entire scene, the thing that we do is we activate this infinite extend. If you put this, it will do the entire scene. It'll extend the whole post process to the entire scene. But yeah, essentially there's only one.
Do you sometimes use several depending on what you want the different shots to look like, or do you?
Yes, sometimes I do more than one, maybe 2, not that much. Just for the kind of moods that I want. Maybe one, more cold tone, and the other one more just to have 2, and then I just enable one and disable the other one. So yeah, you could use even 2, there's no issues. I don't think you have to enable only one.
They were definitely saying that all the models are very beautiful, and they were wondering if you modeled all of them yourself or if some of them were stock.
No, I modeled everything all by myself. It was a nice challenge even there. Because like for the sofa, I start modeling polygon modeling in 3ds Max, and then I import in ZBrush to create my creases. And same thing for every single object, table, props, TV, and so on. Actually, this was box. Yeah, I modeled everything. Thanks.
Yeah, no, it looks beautiful. They were curious how many active lights are in the scene.
So now we have, we're going to see. So we have a directional light. That it's our main source, so the sun. Then we have, for every window, we put a rectangle light. So we have 2 on this side here, 2 here, and the other 4 on this side. And then we have a point light that essentially is our lamp. It's the light for the lamp. Yeah, that's it. It's all these lights here.
And they're all completely dynamic, right?
Yep, they're all dynamic. For ray trace, everything has to be movable. And so if we use ray trace default, it goes cast ray trace shadows. So it has this default. In case it doesn't have it, we have to just enable it. Whatever light is dynamic and movable.
And all of them are doing ray trace shadows, yeah?
Yes, all of them are doing ray trace shadows.
They were curious about when we're not doing the screen share and you're just running this on your PC, what the frame rate is around when you're moving around the scene.
Well, when I move on my scene, it's like I have a 4K monitor and it's demanding, but it's around 24 frames a second with putting the ray trace a little bit. The samples final gathered to 1:1.
And how often?
Also, I could get like 20 frames a second.
And how often do you switch between? Is there a mode where you switch to non-ray traced when you're sort of iterating on placement and sort of the scene, the set dressing a little bit?
No, I always use ray trace. Ray trace is always on for me.
Always on.
Yeah, always on. Always. My laptop has to explode.
Well, hopefully it will last you for a little while.
Oh yeah.
They were curious what your go-to tool for 3D modeling is.
The software that I use.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I use usually I use 3ds Max. That's my main software, and from there, when I model, I import the models in Unreal Engine or using FBX, more, or using Datasmith. It's very awesome. Datasmith imports everything for you. So yeah. And for rendering, I usually use V-Ray with 3ds Max, and sometimes I use Datasmith and imports textures of V-Ray inside my Unreal Engine scene. But if I create textures from scratch, then I just map them. I do UV mapping in 3ds Max, and then I create everything inside of Unreal Engine.
See, we had one question regarding if it's possible to use any of the ray tracing features in VR mode, and as far as I know, the renderer now supports ray tracing in a stereoscopic view, but I doubt you'll be able to hit the sort of frame rate required to have a comfortable VR experience at this time. Obviously, we'll see grand improvements in the future when it comes to that, but as of this moment, it's technically possible based on what exists in the renderer right now with multi-view, but I would not try to go that route just yet.
Yeah, I never tried VR yet, but it's a thing that I wanna dig in just to try to see how it is, especially in Unreal Engine. It would be awesome to see even this arcade scene in VR.
Yeah, what you could do is you could export out a 360 sphere and sort of play that sequence back if you still want, but obviously you're gonna lose some of the depth and some of the other magical elements of looking at a scene in VR.
Yes.
They were curious if you know if several RTX GPUs in one PC is currently working.
I'm usually working with one, so RTX 2080 Ti, and on the laptop I have a RTX 2070. But in Unreal Engine, I suppose it uses only one. I know it could use multiple, but I never tried it yet. But in other render engines that I use both of them. Like V-Ray uses both, so V-Ray uses RTX. You could use both of them. It's very fast.
I do know that we used, I think it was several for the Reflections demo, the Star Wars Reflections demo. There were like four GPUs being used.
Those were demanding GPUs. I think they were Quadro, maybe. I don't remember.
They were wondering, what's the best method to avoid noise in the scene, specifically shadow side or on metal during reflection?
So for the metal, if you don't want noise in the metal, how we explain first, we should hire the samples in our post process. Let's go in post process. And we'll go into reflection settings. So where's the samples per pixel? The more higher it is, and the less noise you'll have on metal. So 1 is you'll see a lot of noise on the metal. Just set this camera. Okay, let's focus. Okay.
Making sure it's in focus.
Yeah, I just got it. Okay, process. Okay, yeah, so now it's 1. So if we put to 6, you can see that the noise goes away on the metal. Everything becomes very clean. Impacts a little bit performance, so just be aware if you hire these settings, performance will be very demanding. So that's why I prefer to have those only for the final output render.
And it's very nice that you can control all of that just from the post-process volume.
Yes, that's really awesome. And in the scene, I mean, more light is in the scene, and less artifacts will have. But yeah, if it's a dark scene, then it's a little bit more difficult. You have to play around with some settings.
They were a little curious about the difference between what are the pros of using rectangular lights on the windows instead of using regular skylight with portals?
Well, the portals are used for the baked version. Now for ray trace, we prefer using rectangular because you can see everything in real time. And the portals are used only for baked version, where it pushes the more information of light inside. So that's where they're used. They're used for baking. That's why I use rectangular in real time.
And then to continue on the rectangular lights, someone was asking if you are importing them from V-Ray/Corona, or if you manually created, if you set them up in Unreal.
Yeah, we set them up in Unreal, so we go in our lighting settings and put our rectangular light here. And as we see here, the rectangular light, so I'll show you some settings here. First setting is the barn door angle. So as you see here, it creates like a little door here, barn door. I usually put this 90, the length right down here, so we have a nice rectangular shape. And then we play around with the height and the width.
They were also asking why you have one for every window. Can't you stretch one across a couple of windows?
No, because the answer for this one here, because if we create one, the shadows will be even different. For each one, you can even pull down the intensity. And if it's only one, it will not be that great. I prefer one rectangle on each window because they're all different. I don't know if you want to make this a little bit less, you could do it. If it's 1, you'll do it for all of them. If I want to make this side a little bit darker, I could do it. And it's more related to have one on each window.
And then they're talking a little bit about translucency, and they were curious. There are 2 questions regarding to translucency. They were wondering if, so let's see here. They were specifically pointing out the picture frames, and they were wondering if you use a clear material shader to get reflections on the glass.
So this is using the raster version. So we do not use translucency for ray trace. There's some one for performance, it will impact performance. And so if you go ray trace, translucency, now we have a raster. You see the difference when we put ray trace on. You see the difference.
Clear. So they're using traditional reflection then?
Yeah. For this one, yes. For the glass and other elements, we're using ray trace. Sorry, we're using the raster version.
And
even for performance is very important.
Yeah, I guess especially if you have several of them. I do
yes.
know I do know that we're working on ray tracing for translucency. As far as what I was told is that there are a lot of interesting problems, and that we do have some ways to solve them, but that we are still iterating, trying to come up with a performant method of doing that. So stay tuned for more feature support in that regard in future engine versions. Then I guess back to a little bit about the scene and modeling. They were wondering if all the walls were modular or if it's all just one mesh.
For now, this wall here, no, they're all meshes, no single meshes. It was one mesh, but now they're separate. We separated them.
Can you share a little bit about
this is one. Yeah, sure.
What would the sort of workflow difference and be using sort of one mesh for the room and the walls versus having them all individual?
Well, I think there's no issues. The only thing is that if you want to change color to one and it's all connected, you'll change the whole color to everything.
Right.
That's why it's better to have them separate, like especially the ceiling. Separate the ceiling, and then there's no issues in that. The only thing is for ray tracing. Yeah, for ray tracing you have to have your walls. You have to have a thickness on the walls, but it doesn't have to be a plane. It has to have a thickness into it. That's what I see. Essentially, to use thick bricks, meshes, not planes. Also have like bleeding issues. But yeah, there's no issues on having them separate or connected.
It just gives you a little bit more control, right?
Yes.
Because otherwise you would have to unwrap them and change a part of the texture, of the one texture that is covering all the walls. So having them all individual allow you to put different paints on them or change one to be brick, etc.
Yeah, perfect.
Let's see. We talked about the picture frames. They were a little bit curious how what your process for UVing is.
My process for UVing is simple UV mapping in 3ds Max. I try to not make them overlap, or else there's going to be issues, especially if you see the scene. But in ray tracing, you don't have issues for UV mapping. You'll have issues if you bake your meshes. So if you do the baking version, so bake your lights, and you don't unwrap, then you'll have issues. But in ray trace, it always has to be a good UV map, or else you could see artifacts, and it will not map properly. Your materials will not map. But that's a benefit of ray tracing. If it's not, even if the UV maps are overlapping, it doesn't matter because everything is in real time.
So pretty much everything in the scene, all the models, you actually did unwrap them in,
Yes,
DCC
Max.
tool. Yeah, prior to
Yeah.
importing them into Unreal.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Someone was curious if there would be a big impact on frame rate if you had an entire apartment instead of a single room. The answer to that would be no, not in this scenario. At least I wouldn't think so, considering that we're doing
Yeah.
It would be an extremely minor cost compared to everything else that's going on in the scene.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, definitely a lot of questions and things to figure out in terms of this new workflow using all ray traced and making sure, because what I believe almost everyone is after is sort of that really realistic look of, this is supposed to look like a picture taken from like your apartment or somewhere else. And I know for
Yeah.
myself from iterating how, and you probably did as well throughout this project, you find little edge cases, right? Like shadows bleeding over,
Mm-hmm.
and light as well. So it's interesting to see your approach towards that, and how you're sort of solving that. Do you have any form of philosophy or anything that you sort of always keep in mind as you're working on these kind of projects?
Well, the first thing I try to look at is the lighting. The lighting for me is important because you could have great models, great project, great everything, but if the lighting is not correct, the scene will be not realistic. So I mainly usually focus first on the lighting and then all the rest. And and for bleeding issues or shadows, I mean, I always use ray trace, so I don't have issues for that. But that could be an issue when you bake your lightings and walls are not connected together. Then that's where you could have some bleeding, shadows issues, and so on. So that's the benefit always of ray trace. There's less
Yeah,
issues, less issues, and less
yeah, because
things to do.
there are no light maps, and um,
Yeah,
you don't have to worry about light map resolution and what the shadows look like when they're on really, shadows are being drawn on a really thin mesh, and um,
yeah.
other typical issues with sort of the baked workflow of
Mhm.
lighting. I guess there's definitely a little bit of discussions around, like, so when do we get this in games? When can games?
Wow. Yeah,
When will
every
there?
time yeah, when I post something, every time, even if it's not archived, um, I usually post, but I'm not doing games, I just post to show what ray trace could do. And everyone's saying, oh, when's this game gonna come out? Or why is it not 60 frames per second? I said, it's not a game. It's not gonna be 60 frames a second. But yeah, it's demanding. It's really demanding ray trace.
But it's also different, right? In this case here, where everything
Mm.
is, we're using ray trace global illumination, we're doing shadowing, um,
Mhm.
all dynamic lights, and I do know that if you're looking to, you can use a few of those features already today. Clearly, you're going to require an RTX card to see any decent frame rate. But there are already
Yeah.
a couple of games out there that are using ray trace shadows, um,
Yes.
as well as global
I
illumination.
play a lot of it even. Like the first one I played, like one show was very nice. Nice game, or has a lot of reflections in that game, and uses RTX
So for all
and
you who are
ray tracing.
excited about that, it's coming. We're still sort of in the infancy and figuring out
Mhm.
the technology and the workflows as well. It's also up to the studio to sort of implement. This is fairly new to almost everyone, and
Yeah.
so slowly technology comes first, and then production, and eventually we'll get to see some really good looking games. And I think we're all excited about
Victor,
that. Yes.
yeah, I saw that the improvements of ray trace really, really great in the years past. So when it first started to now, the improvements are really, really great. It's gonna become even greater.
Yeah, the rendering team here are making large strides, and they're working really hard to make this a reality. And once we start seeing more RTX cards in, you know, the everyday gaming PC, then there will be a bigger market for studios to actually, you know, spend all the extra time required to make their game run with ray tracing on, and then they can actually, you know, see a benefit from doing that because their customers and have access to this technology. A little bit similar in the vein of VR. You know, you sort of require everyone to have the hardware to be able to run it before you're able to invest, you know, large amount of development time into producing products that and products, games, and previous and whatever it would be that actually works on the customer's hardware.
Yeah, that's true.
See, I think we went through most of the questions, and we talked a little bit about sort of how you're exporting these scenes. Where, if people are curious about more of your work, where would you point them to?
I would point them more on Instagram, because that's where I post, you know, my previews and my little videos that I create, and that's the social network that I use most. So Instagram, find me at Shanti Design, or you could go on my website.
I dropped the link for your website in the forum announcement, and if you're watching this on YouTube later, you'll be able to find the link to the forum announcement down in the description. It'll be right there. Well, I think unless there's anything else you'd like to leave our viewers with?
Well, if they have questions, just they could write to me, and I'll be pleased to write back.
Yeah, and we'll let's keep an eye on the forum announcement thread as well, in case there are any questions that comes up once the stream goes up on YouTube, and hopefully we'll be able to chime in and see if there's anything we can respond to there. And that's always something, if you're watching these streams and you're almost never able to capture or see them live, go, you know, the forum announcement is there so that you can go ahead and ask questions afterwards. And hopefully our guests here will find a little bit of time to go and read through them, maybe provide some answers. Sure. I know it's tough. Thank you so much for taking your time to prepare a little bit of a presentation for us, making sure all this, spending the time making sure the screen share and the camera and everything else worked prior to us going live.
Yes.
Yeah, we had some issues a couple of days ago, but I think we overcame them and as well as we could for the stream. So I really appreciate your time, Pasquale. And
thank you, Victor.
For all of you out there in chat, thanks for joining us on the stream. As always, we do a full transcript of the video, and if there was something during it that you would like, you remember we talked about it, but you weren't necessarily sure in what moment during this hour we did, that usually goes up about 3 to 7 days after the video goes up on YouTube, and you can actually open up that transcript file, search for keywords, and then find the appropriate timestamp, and you can go to that portion of the video to look at it. As always, make sure you check out your local meetup groups. There are many of them around the world. Some of them are monthly, some of them are bi-monthly, some of them do it a little bit whenever they have a good presenter. But go to unrealengine.com/user-groups, and you'll be able to find if there's any in your area. And if you don't have any in your area and you know that there's a bit of a community there and you would like to host one, go ahead and send an email to community@unrealengine.com, and we will go ahead and let you know what it's like to be a meetup group organizer, and we'll make sure to get you set up with a meetup page for your city or town, whichever that is. As always, make sure that you follow us on social media. That's where we post all of our updates regarding new features for the engine, as well as what's going to come up on the live stream next. And I would like to take this opportunity to let you all know that next week we're actually going to have 2 of the developers from Gearbox Software who worked on Borderlands 3. They're going to be here with me in the studio, and we're going to go over how they developed some of the aspects of Borderlands. They're actually also going into a little bit of the art side of things, to how they made Borderlands to get that awesome special look. So stay tuned for that. I hope you'll be watching it, Pasquale. It'd be great to see you.
Yeah, I will.
See you there in chat. And once again, special thanks to Pasquale for joining us. All of you in chat who are here today watching, asking awesome questions. Without them, we wouldn't have as much content on the stream, so we really appreciate it. And I think with that said, we will see you all next week, and me and Pasquale are going to wave a very, very, very non-royal goodbye. Have a great week, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thank you.